agree completely with your point that there is if you don't get this politics of the city right, and that's one of the things we are now working on to see how to make, we have been asking for a mayor and council for many years. See, the issue really in India is that we have a representative democracy. We have no idea what it takes to make a participative democracy. When you say consumer citizen in political speak or whatever it is, this is what the shift is, right? You only want, you vote somebody and the political party in power and probably ably supported by the bureaucratic system uses the word,
can you hear?
Sorry, uses the word mandate. Okay, we have been given a mandate to rule.
Yes.
Now, I disagree with all those statements. First of all, a mandate means a direction. It does not mean authority. And it says to rule. And rule has feudatory connotations. And the language of real politics speak today is that even the budget, which was presented yesterday, the Karnataka budget, it talks of giving things to people, giving things to its citizens. The language itself is wrong. It says, the political party in power says, we are giving a grant of 5,000 crore or XYZ crore to people. And the language is also saying it's a very feudatory mindset which still exists in India. And this is the fundamental reason, and you raised the point of the political mayor. You know why we don't have mayors in the city? Because we have learned from other cities that if you let a strong mayor rule a city, he becomes the prime minister usually after that. Or at least the chief minister. If you take the mayor of Seoul in Korea, the only city without a soul, though it's called that, till an architect became a mayor and then became this thing, then it suddenly got a soul. If you take James Lerner in Curitiba or Porto Alegre, same story. If you take, the moment you allow a city mayor, I mean, if you look at Rudy Giuliani or Bloom, they become a national figure. And they start, what do you call it? Being a threat to the... Bangalore has always been ruled by people not from Bangalore. Their constituencies are from somewhere else in Karnataka, and they behave in exactly the way that pleases their own constituencies. Are usually quite happy with them because I don't know whether they build steel flyovers there, but they definitely do a lot of things in those constituencies which take care of. And the attitude to the city is an attitude of exploitation. It is never an attitude of inhabitation. Most of them, but what happens is that that is changing now, and I have some hope for the future. Let me not sound completely pessimistic. The children of these politicians who have ruled this state for so many years were born and educated here. And if you talk to the younger generation, that is the people in their 30s and the 40s, I mean, in India you have to be a geriatric case to be the chief minister till about now, but that is starting to change now with the current dispensation. But people in their 40s, they've been educated here, they live here, their friends are here, and their concept of a native place is something they go to once in a year, just like the rest of us. That is starting to make a difference to the politics of the thing. So I'm starting to wonder whether Bangalore is on the cusp. You see, the other thing in India is that everything is a hereditary profession, right? If you're an architect, you become an architect. If your father's a actor. Anything, actor, you become an actor. If you only cricket is starting to avoid this because you actually have to know how to play cricket. So other than that, but you see all politicians' children becoming politicians. Now, if the senior politicians does not want to let go of control of the city, and I really cannot understand why the state has to run Bangalore city when we have 198 councillors in council, right? And the mayor is just a ceremonial figurehead. Probably one of the children of these politicians who is showing some political acumen has to be promoted, has to become the mayor of this city. There is no other way out of this trap, because as long as it is somebody else coming up who is not part of the mainstream political party, that they will never let it happen. And the only way to break this nexus is to allow, maybe that's the Faustian deal we have to do, that the children of politicians have to become the mayor of the city, at least as a start point. Otherwise, it's not going to change. I'd flip over at any point. Every time I talk to a senior politician, the attitude towards the city is, oh, you know, these corporator guys, they just handle garbage contracts. They have no clue what to do about the bigger city. And I asked them, what is exactly your idea of the bigger city? The dark secret is they have no clue either. Right? And it was very clearly brought home in this steel flyover agitation when the senior leaders of the state of Karnataka from all parties kept on telling me, but then how will you relieve congestion? You have to put a flyover. So I had to say it repeatedly. I think Mr. Atheeq was also there in one of those meetings. I say, who told you that to relieve traffic congestion, that you have to put a flyover? All of them looked a little gobsmacked and they said, nobody actually asked that question before. So, and then the conversation started happening after that because we operate on some certain, you know, fixed things in society.
Yeah, I think the conversations was should be concrete or steel.
Yeah,
it was that level of discussion.
Steel maybe, yeah, it was never about, so I kept saying flyovers move congestion from one point to the other. And then I asked a senior politician who came back from New York the day before I met him. He said, how many flyovers did you see in New York? He thought for about 2 minutes. He said, none. Except one on the edge, which is a freeway. I said, you mean the population of New York is roughly the same as Bangalore city, right? It's about 90 lakh. How come they don't need flyovers? He said, they have mass transit. I said, wow. You know, you saw it. But what you did was sightseeing in New York and you did not see the site, SIT. You did not see the city. You just saw the Statue of Liberty but you went on a train. What stops you doing the same thing in Bangalore? So the younger politicians immediately understand. They said, yes, we get it. It's going to change. But like you pointed out, Shailesh, unless that politics of the city changes and the state stays as the state, and maybe that's the only way to do it in Bangalore is move the state capital to Davangere or something. Otherwise, they're never going to let go. You know? And you know, maybe that's a drastic move like that is what is going to save the city rather than hoping against hope that the city will have a powerful mayor and council. Thank you.
So that's ideal. Thank you, Naresh. I think that point was well noted. So we have an interesting kind of a hybrid mix of politician that we're recommending right now, which is hereditary mayor that has still very interesting. I mean, I think yeah. So Shailesh, I'd love to jump in on
the only politician a politician trusts is his son or daughter.
You see,
I've got to remember this is still India, but it's interesting to hear this, Naresh. Thank you.
and this is not just true about Bangalore. Please don't believe that even if the capital shifts to Davangere or Shimoga or Mysore, that the ATM machine of Bangalore is going to be stopped. Bangalore is a revenue generation mechanism for illegal gains which can be spent in the rest of the state. And that is true again for most of the 53 million plus cities. I have another option, which is to take all 5 million plus cities, all 50 lakh plus cities, and make them into city states. So, you know, as long as you have a chief minister, he will or she will not tolerate the emergence of a powerful mayor. Right? So, we asked Jay Panda in a Goa conclave, what will you get excited about if you want to run Bombay? He says, make Bombay into a city state and make me the chief minister. That's something that politicians understand. And if I look at global examples, actually metropolitan regions are not part of a larger rural state. So let's not talk about China. Most of us would not have been born in China because we are not the firstborns. But even so, Beijing, Shanghai, Chongqing, Tianjin are all city states. And a lot of other countries and a lot of other examples I have. And this cannot happen in Bangalore alone. It has to happen across the country in all the 5 million plus cities. And I'm a very optimistic guy. Most of India's GDP is going to happen in cities and in large cities. What we are effectively doing is we are driving a car at 60 miles per hour with the brakes fully jammed. If we convert the 5 million plus cities into city states, then the brakes will be lifted off. Then the Bangalore chief minister will not have to bother about rural Chitradurga. And today, given a set of 270 odd MLAs and only 30 from Bangalore, no chief minister is going to be politically very bothered about Bangalore. And this is not just about Bangalore, it's about all. The other thing that I'd like to suggest is, we have, so why don't you know any two-term mayor in India? Anyone in the audience knows a two-term mayor in India?
Are there two-term mayors in India?
Why not? Why not? The answer is that unlike MPs and MLAs, where reservation for SC and ST seats is fixed, in every single mayoral or councillor term, it rotates. And it's a very deliberate and devious design by the MPs and MLAs, so that their children become MPs and MLAs, and young talent does not rise up through the ranks. So I would like to say that, it's only after the S.R. Bommai judgment of 1994 that Article 356 of dismissing state governments was stopped. And it is only after that that two-term and three-term chief ministers came into India. And chief ministers have been delivering growth. Delhi has not. Similarly, if you have a two-term mayor or a three-term mayor, that mayor, she or he will transform the city. So you need to do away with rotation, which is under Article 243T of the Constitution. I'm happy to engage further, and I've written on this.
No, I think there's some very interesting ideas. I don't know what you think, but the fact is there's absolutely no straightforward turn of the key that will solve problems. But the idea is to be able to think together, come up with something different. I'm very interested by what Naresh said. I'm very intrigued by what Shailesh has mentioned. And Atheeq has a point. Absolutely, no. I'd love for you to jump in.
Just a comment. Delhi is almost a city state. It has hardly any rural constituency. But Delhi city is run by the central government.
Yes. As most federal capitals are in the world. I mean, Washington DC.
If it is not the chief minister, then it will be home minister.
Absolutely. You have to have one Maibab. Who's the Maibab of Bengaluru?
Yeah, good question.
Skin in the game.
Exactly, with skin in the game. That's right.
So this is, I'd like to have one question which you can all just think about, and if you have some comments, I'd really like to hear about it. I would perhaps, after we finish, throw it open to questions from the audience. But I have, again, coming back to that transition. All of us are in spaces that we've thought about, understood, can go back and forth. I'm far newer in the space, so I'm saying, look at it from my point of view. As somebody who greatly loves the city, and I have an example of why I feel sometimes strong movement or singular movement can make a difference, I'd like very much to know if there was one doable thing for shifting people to be more hands-on citizens. There has to be a sense of motivation. There has to be I have to know there's something in it for me, even if it's goodness or if it's kindness. There has to be something. So in self-enlightenment from that perspective, what is it that you feel would make that difference? And what is the one thing that structurally or institutionally should be done to improve urban governance for Bangalore? So these are two questions I'd like you to think about. But before, and I'd like to sort of have your thoughts on this. But before that, I'd just like to share an example. I'm just saying I believe that this is where we can make that difference. Several years ago, I don't know whether you remember, there was a ruling that was put in saying that you cannot smoke inside a building. My husband used to work with ITC at some point, so you kind of feel like you own all the cigarettes in the world. And I was saying, just get a life. This is Bangalore. This is India. You're not going to get somebody to stop smoking inside their house, their office. You can't. It just doesn't work like this. So I was contemptuous. I still remember, I used to write a column at that time, and I still remember writing with great laughter saying, can you imagine a country stopping smoking? Where it's a thing of freedom. I walk around, I can comb my hair, I can do stuff, I can smoke a cigarette. So you can say this is what we do in Singapore, this is how it is in X country, but this is not going to happen. But guess what? Guess what? And I was so happy to eat my words. I was also happy because I could make my husband pay for every single cigarette that he smoked subsequently. But it happened. And I cannot undermine you have to admit that it was good. There was a certain sense. Did it happen overnight? It did. Was there some kind of receptiveness that happened that enabled it? There was. What was it? Do we know? Is there a sense of awareness and receptiveness that is happening right now as we speak? Are we part of that throb that is going to make a huge thing happen? Now, smoking may be a very small thing, but if you start doing the metrics, which Naresh talked about, of what it means in terms of air quality, children who are being born, the reduction of cancer or hospitalization, medical costs, and just sheer quality of life. And just the irritation of hearing somebody with a cough or smoke. My father smoked for 40 years, so I can still hear him now. You know, if you quantify that, I'm sure there's a lot. What else are we doing that can be this one big change, which we feel won't happen? I know India won't happen, but it does, and it did. So I'm asking you, it's a very trivial or it's a very big example, depending on how you look at it. But I want you to hold that thought when we talk about what is this one thing that we can do that will have the first part of the discussion, which is consumer to citizens. So I've got this huge group of people who've come in from different areas. I myself am here. I'm saying the city doesn't work. We can't do this. You guys. So when does that transition happen? And what are structural things that we need to do to make that difference? So, if I can may start with Mark, because
That's your second question first. What's become evident in the last 24 hours is one of the big differences between Manchester and here is the longevity of both the politicians and the bureaucrats. So in Manchester, the senior politician he's the leader of Manchester City Council, has been there for 20 years. His lead bureaucrat has been there almost as long, 15, 16 years. And Greater Manchester is, think of it as 10 different local authorities, with Manchester City and Salford City in the centre. What struck me from your conversation was that the people who live in the towns around the periphery don't see the city, I don't think, as being something to exploit. They see it as something that they can take advantage of. It provides them with jobs, it provides them with entertainment, it provides them with art, it provides them with access to amenities that they don't have within their own civic centre. So they don't think of it as exploiting the city, they see it as the city being a benefit to them, and maybe that gives them a sense of ownership that maybe isn't here, I don't know. So it strikes me that from everything I've heard, the longevity of people within positions of power is important. Now 15 years is extreme, but that's the way it's worked in Manchester. But if you have people who leave after 18 months, then the agenda changes,
yes,
and the priorities change.
so we
And
need time to make an impact.
yeah, but as long as you're making an impact on a plan that's been agreed, and that's your bit of the impact, that will be fine. But if you're setting out a whole new plan, that's more difficult. I agree with the issue of longer term planning, and if you're going to set targets, then setting targets based on sound evidence and sound science is really important. Because when somebody backs you into a corner and said, why did you agree this? Maybe something's gone wrong. You can say, with hand on heart, I used the best evidence I had available to me at the time. Yeah? Even if I was wrong, that's the evidence that we used. And the reason I think that's important is that it allows you to think about the implications of the targets that you then set. So air quality, as an example, we have to meet European air quality thresholds. We're currently failing in Manchester. But we know what that target is, and we know what we need to do to get to that target. It's actually about private vehicles. We need to do something there. But that then gives us the authority to say to people, we have to do this. It might be unpopular, but we have to do it because we need to meet these air quality targets. And we need to meet these air quality targets to save you dying an early death and your children growing up to be stunted in their mental ability or their growth. Yeah? And that brings me on to my final point, which is answering your first question, I think, around how do you engage people and what one thing could be done. The example you gave was smoking. The difference between smoking and combing your hair is that combing your hair doesn't have an impact on other people, smoking does. And so the same thing, I think, would have to apply to this situation. You perhaps need to look at those things that are going to impact on other people, and it might be the next generation. So it might be, most parents at least, will care passionately about the quality of life that their children are going to live. They perhaps care more about that than they do about their own quality of life, because everybody wants to leave something better for their children. So picking something that might be a longer term solution, but you can start very quickly, that you can make a change very quickly, and you can sell to people as being, okay, we're not going to solve this overnight, but in 15 years' time, your children will have this benefit. That is the sort of thing I would advocate. From what I've heard, and this is where I come back to my 24-hour rule, you know, I might be wrong, but the better management of the waste system, being able to utilize a circular economy, so that you're putting renewables back into the economy in different ways. That can create jobs. So instead of being a new consumer and then throw away a disposable society, there's time and effort that goes into fixing, repairing or repurposing existing equipment. Same with food, making sure that at the very bottom of the hierarchy, you're at least getting energy out of your waste. But you try everything before to get to a position where you're recycling the resources that you have available to you. Because, and this is my final sentence, if you're right, and if the population of this city is going to double, then what will stop it is the resources that it has available to it. And the only way to solve that is by getting more resources in from outside, I would argue would be very difficult, or to make best use of the resources that you have available. And it strikes me that, just from what I've seen and what I've heard, that the waste cycle here could be an awful lot more efficient and could benefit people straight away, but in the longer term could really benefit the population and the younger generation in many different ways, including economically.
Thanks for that. That I think that is quite coherent and covers different aspects. And I do agree with the last point that you made on being sustainable and being able to, you know, to keep within the city rather than going out, you know, for resources. Atheeq, your thoughts on what we discussed, which was, you know, what is that one thing that you would suggest to advise to move from being a consumer to a citizen, and that one structural thing from a governance perspective that you would, as a citizen, advocate? I would like Naresh, please jump in. It's just.
I agree with what Shailesh was saying about the need for governance in the city. The city is governed by its own set of leaders. But I think Naresh mentioned that we are in a trap. I don't know when we will really come out of it, and he was suggesting that we approach the children of the politicians.
It's a thought.
I was also thinking about the decentralization that took place thanks to the 73rd and 74th Amendment that was brought in. So, but prior to that, those amendments that came in, I don't really know whether there was a sustained citizen movement in the country demanding it, or is it a reform that just came from the top? I'm not so sure. So, if one thing that the Bangaloreans could do is perhaps carry out a sustained campaign that we need to change the way we govern.
He's got advanced knowledge. He's saying it's coming. I'd be interested. Watch this space.
But given the current state of governance, what I would like to see change. I would like to see is that if we could make the city more focus on its mobility, focus on mobility of the city. That is, even if the population, as Shailesh says, is going to increase, that we need to.
We'll put up a Trump-like wall around. That's a possibility.
And make rest of Karnataka pay for it. So, is that we focus on mobility, we focus on make the city workable, and then look at public transport. We are in government, given the current system in the budget, etc. We are looking at it, and this time we really, in the consultation process, we really fought for introducing more buses in the city, and then there is an announcement that 3,000 BMTC buses will be inducted. And today I saw a report in newspaper that 3,000 buses, experts say it is not enough. Of course it's not enough, but at least 3,000 buses. So more buses, mass transit, because complete the metro and then bring in suburban rail and make the city walkable by making pavements. Pavements is one thing that I keep wondering, why is it that we cannot build good pavements in this country? Anywhere in the city, why is it so hard? It's not rocket science to make pavements, but I simply don't understand why a pavements just can't be built. And even where pavements are built, this is what I want, we want us to change, is when even pavements are built, sometimes civic agencies themselves occupy those pavements. I would like to just share an anecdote here that when I was in the Prime Minister's office, the NDMC commissioner came to visit my boss, who was Joint Secretary, and he was sitting there, and so I suddenly asked him, he was my senior, so I said, "Sir, why are you encroaching your own pavements?" He was angry. He said, "What do you mean?" I said, you are putting up advertisements, those neon light advertisements he was putting up, because Luton's Delhi has very wide pavements. And those pavements are being occupied by electricity poles, by transformers, and by neon light hoardings. Because somewhere that ownership of the road and the pavement is not there, and that's where I think it needs to change from city politicians, bureaucrats like me, and the citizens, where we need to really fight for our pavement so that we can walk. So if we can change the way the mobility is looked at in the city, because when you talked about buses, then many of the senior politicians and bureaucrats in the meetings, they ask, but where are the roads? Or how can you bring in more BMTC buses? It will add to congestion and not reduce it. So it is quite a difficult task to convince people that
chicken and egg.
That mode share, shifting of the modes is possible. So that is the change that I would like to see, and I would also like to see that a city is a very diverse city, and then it is also a very stratified city. We are all the time looking at those who can take to Twitter and blog and then and attract my attention and my bandwidth, but we do not we do not worry about the western part of the city or the Tannery Road and that area, because none of them really tweet. So
I see a new hashtag. Tannery Road doesn't tweet.
So we need also a city which is more sensitive and alive to those people who are not vocal. Thank you.
No, good point. Thank you so much, Atheeq. Naresh, you go, and I'm just going to quickly address something which Atheeq brought up. Yeah.
The mic is not working.
No, you can.
I think he's switching it on. Okay. See, Justice Hegde spoke about the decline in moral values, right? And he sort of emphasized it more and more that we don't seem to care. And actually, if you look at it from a city perspective, there is a term used in usually in the area of data science and knowledge called the tragedy of the commons, right? Which means that we can sit here, all of us sit here today in this hotel, and if you sort of crinkle your eyes a little bit, and there are not so many brown people in the room, there are more brown people in the room, you could be in any room in any hotel in the world. This is no different. How do you know you live in India? You step out of this hotel and there is a ditch in front of the hotel which is running with raw sewage, right? And we don't seem to think that is part of our city. We don't own it as a people. And the fundamental problem is that our aspirations are all wrong. It's values, of course, there is a moral decline. That's all over the world. I'm not sure I can sort of teach moral science. I can't reintroduce it as a subject in curriculum. But the aspirational aspect of a city, the wrong things are being promoted, and not just by the political system, but also by the merchandising class. I mean, yesterday Maruti Suzuki announces that India will be the second largest world market for cars in 3 years. Right? I'm very happy. I'm sure all the car manufacturers are licking their lips as we speak, but you know that this is a wrong aspiration. I mean, if the industry does, and if you do not get together as civil society and define the right aspirations for a city, you pointed out that, you know, the marginalized people in the city don't tweet. And I cannot believe that tweeting is now I mean, it's become a hugely aspirational thing that if you tweet, sometimes you get an answer. And earlier, at least, it makes people feel empowered that a police commissioner actually replies in Bangalore to a tweet, and you can write him hundreds of letters, they won't reply back to you. That is the tragedy we have come to. So what I would change, if I was the one thing, is I would start by changing what it means in terms of aspirational values to live in a modern society of India. And it should not be this, I want the next biggest LCD TV, I want the next fanciest car, I want the next fanciest this thing. Change that conversation to, I want clean air, I want water, I want good education for my children, 10 minutes walking from my house. An average child in Bangalore travels 1 hour to go to school every day and 1 hour back. Right? So we are not the only ones who are commuting. Those little fellows, instead of playing, you never see anybody playing on the streets because they're all busy sitting in buses. You never see any children at all, except early in the morning. Is this the kind of society we want to leave for our children? Certainly I will not agree to this at all. I may be accused of talking from an elitist viewpoint. The moment I say that, people say, do you have a car? Do you travel by bus? And it's immediately towards me. Yes, I do. But if there was a public transit which is predictable, easy, clean, you know, Enrique Penalosa, whom I'm proud to call at least a friend, said, a developed country is a country in which the rich ride public transportation. And India has to learn to change that aspirational mode to say that, rather than pushing more and more private transportation.
Thanks, Naresh. I think it's also a question of metrics. You know, when somebody tells you that you have 62 lakh vehicles in Bangalore, and I don't want to do the math in terms of numbers of how much carbon emission happens with each of these vehicles. 62 lakh vehicles, and we are second only to Delhi. So we are just second most developed vehicle city in India. And guess what's happening? We're coughing, we've got asthma, so many other problems. But somebody has to define it. Unless there's a problem and you feel you can own it or you can resolve it, with your own little bit, you're not going to do it. And you're not going to move into that citizen mode very quickly unless you know. I have a very simple statement which I've used so many times, I'm kind of bored with it myself, but I say to myself all the time, once I know, I can't unknow. Somebody tells you something, and when I heard about, you know, for example, the vehicle situation, or why the steel flyover perhaps was not really so relevant, you have to know why. You can't object because it's a fuzzy logic and I want to go hug a tree. It's because it has very strong metrics, it has a data which you can understand, which does not have long-term impact, all those things. So I think knowledge is a very large part, you know, to add to what Naresh is saying. And then the intangibles of being a citizen of a city, of loving what it means, of the public spaces, of being able to look out and see a Cubbon Park that just makes my heart want to sing. How can I describe that in a budget or in a plan? But I know that can translate into different things, you know, so.
It's actually, just to sort of end what I was saying, most of the private sector also engaging with cities today, I mean, and public-private partnership, you should comment more about that. It's always like, they never ask, what is the problem we want to solve? It is always, this is the solution we want to push. We have to change that thinking to...
Narrative has to change, yeah.
Everybody's got solutions to every problem of India, and they're only pushing their own solutions. They never define the problem at all, and maybe Shailesh can elaborate more on that.
Shailesh, I'm giving you the last word on that.
Please, Atheeq wants to have a word.
No, I just wanted to say that, just in continuation, if Bangalore has so many vehicles and we are adding so many thousand vehicles per day, I think the political leadership with whom I work also needs to feel confident that if I introduce restrictions on vehicle purchase and vehicle registration, I will not be very unpopular. People are very, very scared about putting any restrictions on the citizens. There is an original point that I was mentioning, that people in other cities live with lot of restrictions. They take a car into a particular core area, then they have to pay congestion tax, and then if you drive a little faster, then you have to pay a ticket. And here, why don't we introduce a licensing system where no further new vehicles will be allowed to come into the city, or the number of vehicles, new vehicles that will come into the city will be equivalent to the vehicles that will be replaced. So that, I think that is where again there is a need for
Will.
on both sides.
I agree. It's like smoking. We're coming back to that example. It's will. But thanks for that input. Yeah.
So let me quote Boris Johnson. As you know, he was mayor of London, and now he's foreign secretary. Dominic, you know him, right? Yeah, exactly. So he was there in Delhi, and I'm president of the Chevening Alumni India, and I was supposed to, get a very lively group of Cheveners to meet him, and I said, expect the unexpected with Boris. So I asked him, what should we do about cities, and what's your basic learning from London? He said, only one thing: transport, get rid of private cars, use public transit, and around transit nodes, use high-rise and live, work, play. So we call it transit-oriented development, right? And actually Bangalore, I am associated with Bhartiya City. We're making 20 million square feet over a 126-acre area. Had we had to make the same thing in Gurgaon, in Haryana, we would have required 600 acres. So in many ways, Bangalore has very progressive rules. So that's what Boris told me. The other thing is, and I'll just take 30 seconds. K.V. Kamath has this very interesting theory about per capita income and politics. He says when per capita income is lower than $500 US, the bare necessities, food, shelter, clothing are important. That's what drives politics. When it hits 1,000, then you have some more money, so malls and multiplexes start happening. And when you cross 1,500, then actually people start demanding better governance and better infrastructure. So the second smartest set of people in India are the Bollywood movie makers. So in the 70s and 80s, you had Manoj Kumar, Roti Kapda aur Makan. Remember?
Yep.
In the 90s, you had Jeete Hain Shaan Se, Marte Hain Shaan Se. So you're getting some money. In 2015, you're having Shanghai and Peoply Live. The smartest set of people in India are the politicians. And politics is going to change because the aspirational Indian is not going to keep quiet. Your agitation on the steel flyover would not have succeeded 20 years ago. It is succeeding now. And that is why I'm hugely optimistic that city level politics is going to change because of per capita income. One thing I'm sure of, Indian per capita income is going to rise, not fall. Thanks.
Thanks for that insight. I think that's a good one. And we have questions. So I'm really sorry. Who's got the mic? Okay, let me come around.
Please.
Yeah. We've slightly overrun time.
Yeah. And John Major came out with Citizens Charter, where he said bureaucracy should have pride in delivering services, and citizens should know what they'll get from the government reliably. How did bureaucracy change, and what can we learn from there? And I think just a couple of quick things. Would open data, Sakala, RTI and ward committees, which are already existing in the constitutional scheme of things, if government owns and runs them, will we see the change happen?
So 2 questions. Yeah.
I think this is one that we're still on a journey for. So I think we are making huge progress in making not just data, but intelligent information available to more people. David gave some examples earlier today, actually, in Leeds, where real-time data on dashboards is available for people to scrutinize and even take and, through citizen science, utilize to manipulate and come up with their own conclusions. And I think we're heading that way. We have certainly our transport systems, the data that we've got now is better than it ever has been. And our next iteration is going to be where you can stand at a bus stop and your phone will tell you when the next bus is going to turn up. There are other parts of our system which I still think we need to improve. And they tend to be where 2 different data sets overlap. So if you need 2 data sets to give you the answer to a question, sometimes, I think you said it earlier, the data is still in silos. And that's still where we are. So I think we've moved a long way. The technology is there. The understanding of what we need to do is there, but we haven't yet achieved turning data into intelligence.
Thanks, Atheeq.
Yeah, I think things are changing a lot, and this is I always wonder as to how reforms come up in government, because I asked the question about how did the 73rd and 74th Amendment come about, how did Sakala come about, and reform comes through various means. Sometimes it comes through stealth. So, like recently we unveiled a dashboard called Pratibimba, in which we are courageous enough or foolhardy enough to put information about projects, and many of them are being shown as delayed. So, Sakala is another initiative where we are binding ourselves that within so many days we are going to deliver services, and empowering the citizens through ward committees, better participation, etc. These are the things that need to come, and I do sincerely hope that, and I expect them to come in the days, weeks and months to come, and they may come through anyway. They may come through citizens' pressure, they may come through top, but I believe that citizens' pressure is going to make governments change, and they are changing. And so, like Shailesh said, I am also very optimistic about the way urban governance is going to evolve over the time. India governance is a chaotic process, but my only consolation is that it each time moves a level higher. At least that's what I like to believe.
So hope there. A question?
My question is to Shailesh. Having not set the fundamental infrastructure right or properly placed in Bangalore, a city like Bangalore, do you think that the constructive dissatisfaction is the main cause for all these chaotic problems that are emerging on an everyday basis in Bangalore?
So if I understood you correctly, the inadequate planning of infrastructure in Bangalore is leading to citizen dissatisfaction. Is that right? The answer is absolutely right. Absolutely, yes. And here, as an infrastructure student, I would say that each infrastructure project goes through roughly 4 stages. The first is design, the second is finance, the third is construction, the fourth is operation maintenance. What we do not do right is the design part. So, there's this old saying that marry in haste and repent at leisure. So in infrastructure, it is start in haste and repent at leisure. Whereas, the kind of process that I heard you describing with Prince 2 certification of projects is far more rigorous. At the same time, is Bangalore deciding on what infrastructure Bangalore should have? No, it's the state government of Karnataka. So if you gave the option to Bangalore, maybe they decide. So let me just make a blanket statement. Out of 10 million people in Bangalore, 8 million cannot speak English. In fact, probably 9 million cannot speak English. And 9 million people do not use cars. So if you really wanted to plan for Bangalore, you would not encourage cars and flyovers. In fact, the single biggest enemy of Bangalore, as I see it, is the private car. So if you had a political champion who had the best interest of all the 10 million people of Bangalore, the first thing that Boris Johnson did was to make sure that the private car was discouraged. And he was hugely popular. So Modi has demonstrated that demonetization actually may have hit the rich or not, but it was loved by the poor. The chief minister who says that the private car is going to be banished, the poor are going to love him. He's going to be chief minister for the next 20 years.
Aspirational. Okay.
Couple of things. So,
So 2 questions. Oh, sorry. I will. Okay. Sorry about that. Maybe we can continue the conversation at dinner. I'm sorry.
Before one request, Priya, I'd just like to request all the Chevening alumni in the room to stand up so that the others can know how to become like you. Chevening alumni, please stand up. Thank you. And Dominic, you chose well. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Shailesh. Yeah.
thank you, Shailesh, for making me feel, different or nice. So, a couple of observations and then a question. One, Atheeq's tweet does work. 2 tweets and I had a much better road in front of my house. That's one. And secondly, from what I've seen, is that there was a proposal in Bangalore to break the Bangalore Mahanagarapalikha into three or much smaller
Bifurcation.
Yeah, or trifurcation as it was called. From your experience, Shailesh and Atheeq, I think you've done something like that in Delhi. Will that make any difference, or would we probably be going down the same way?
I really don't know, because at least my conversation with my colleagues and my friends in Delhi tells me that it has not really worked in Delhi.
So I can answer the question about Delhi specifically, because Sheila Dikshit essentially was the mayor of Delhi. Even though she was called chief minister, so is Arvind Kejriwal, the mayor of Delhi. And to distinguish herself from the municipal corporation, she said, let's have three of them. So they are the mayors and I am the chief minister. So it was not done with any great administrative objective. Having said that, I was in Jakarta last Sunday, and Jakarta is a large city, almost as big as Bangalore, and they have 5 mayors and municipal corporations. Toronto does not. So it's, but I actually read the BBMP report, and I know most of the people who wrote it, and as an urban student, I don't agree with it.
Can I say something about that? The division which is proposed by the small expert committee that did Bangalore created a city of haves and have-nots. The money of Bangalore and the money generating components of Bangalore, if you separate the west from the east, there will be civil war. Then southeast, there will be civil war.
You're right. This is what has happened in Delhi. East Delhi Municipal Corporation is poor. South Delhi Municipal Corporation is rich. East Delhi cannot pay salaries.
If you ask me personally, I think Whitefield should secede from Bangalore. Other than that, I think the rest of the city should stay as one. Or Gurgaon. Gurgaon, as you call it.
I live there.
But,
No, I think we've got some very interesting takeaways and statements, and I think this is going to be fun to go back and listen to and remember what was been said. Now, I'm really sorry because we've kind of overrun on time, but there are those 3 questions. Please hold that, because at the end of it, I think we're still going to have dinner and we're going to have time to be able to chat with our panelists and take it further. I'm going to hand this over to Aman, but with just one last word. The focus of this is, while all of us engage, and we are delighted as Cheveners to be having probably the minds and the spaces to invest back in our city. But I would like to just sort of leave the thought with each one of us in the room that if we haven't engaged before, this is a great time to start. This is a great time to give back if there's any love that we have for our city. Before we have, apart from lakes foaming and all sorts of crazy things that are happening which bring us the wrong kind of ignominy, I would say, bring us a lot of bad publicity, and it's bad to have a city that we can today be proud of. And that famous statement, which is cliched but will be said, is that the best time to plant a tree was maybe 10 years ago, and the next best time is today. So there is something that we need to do. The only thing is we assume the next person will do it. Please, that first step into the water that needs to be taken, whether it's putting up a complaint in I Change My City, or it's engaging with your corporation, it's engaging with, maintaining greenery, it's talking to your MLA or corporator, it doesn't matter, but just as long as you feel a sense of power. Today, anything that goes wrong, I send it out to I Change My City. I just feel a sense that I will make a difference, because somewhere out there you feel information is recorded. How many of us are doing that? So if it's small or large, the steel flyover may have been a big one. There may be other things that would be more participative and less confrontational. But it is what it is. And at the end of it, we feel a part of a city in its true nature, rather than, just having something which is disconnected and disengaged. I think Bangalore is at a phenomenal cusp right now, at a huge inflection point where something magical is going to happen. And the only reason why it's going to happen, and I leave you with this thought, is because of people like us. And it's people like us who put that first step forward and say, to quote Obama, we can. Yes, we can. Right. So I'm going to hand it over to Aman.
Thank you, and thanks for this really engaging discussion. I think it only makes me feel that there's so much more to know. And I think probably 2 comments. I think one, I really feel optimistic. Here, like Shailesh said, there's probably the time's now, and we all believe things are going to happen. I also believe that we all can make an impact, we all can contribute, and I would probably make a comment to Atheeq that we are willing to give. You give us the right framework. If the government is willing to make some tough decisions, I'm sure a lot of citizens will come along. And I think demonetization has shown that. Just before we close, a quick word of thanks. I would say, thank you to all the panelists. Dominic, thank you so much for your support. I would also like to acknowledge, some of the people who've supported us from the High Commissioner's office. Manjuna, thank you so much for your help. Kunen, from my colleague, she's been working pretty actively the last few days just to make this happen. So thank you so much, Kunen. Our next session is planned on the 26th of April. We will be sending out invites for those shortly. We plan to cover the subject of diversity at workplace. We plan to do more sessions, and we'll look for your feedback. There's a feedback form which will probably be with you. What would you like to hear? We want to engage a lot more. We'll pick up some of the topical issues, try and create more awareness around those, and maybe build a larger agenda with those as well. So on that note, I would just, before we close, I would request Dom again if you could please help and just give some mementos to the panelists. Yeah.
We are all right.
So thank you for being a great audience, and thank you for investing in your city going forward. Thank you so much, Aman.
I hope all you guys got ROTI. You know the full form of roti? Return on time invested.
And thank you. Before you all leave, we've got dinner organized. I would be glad if you could join us for dinner. Look forward to some interactions over dinner as well. Thank you. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you, Aman, for doing all this and setting it up. So.